If we sign out from one window, we want to be signed out of another because that window will just mysteriously stop working. So we want a way to find out from Firebase when we've signed in or signed out. The only reason we're not super frustrated right now is because we are saving users in local storage, which is nice, but that doesn't mean we're actually signed in, does it? Because we can't actually talk to the database, even if we saved a user in local storage. That gets our UI to show us main instead of sign in, but it doesn't actually get us any data from the database. So let's look at our documentation for Firebase. Let's look at manage users. Create a user, get the currently signed in user. Let's see about that. Get the currently signed in user. The recommended way to get the current user is by setting an observer on the auth object. Firebase.auth, we've seen that before. On auth state changed. Pass in a callback. It'll pass in a user to our callback. If it's there, that means we're signed in. If we're not signed in. This seems like a better way to find out whether we're signed in. So probably when we first load app, we should start listening for this. So on auth state changed. That tells me it's going to wait for any change in our authentication status. Either we are signed in or we're not. So if that changes, this callback's going to get called. So an app component did mount. Yeah, that's all fine. We're importing auth already. So auth.on auth state changed. There it is. We pass in a callback. That callback, it tells us, is going to get a user object. So that way we can check if that user's there and do sign in-y stuff, or find out if it's not and do sign out-y stuff. If user, what do we want to do if the user's there? Call handle auth. If our authentication status changed and there is a user, that means we just signed in. Let's call this .handle auth. Pass in user. Otherwise, it means we've signed out. So we don't need to call auth.signout because we just did that. But we want to do these two things. So let's make another one called handle unauth. That does those things. So this is the stuff that happens after we sign out. The button, the sign out button still needs to call auth.signout. Then this stuff needs to happen. But with on-auth state changed, this will get called automatically is the idea here. So let's do that. We need to remove it from state, remove it from local storage. So if user, we signed in, else we signed out. And we want to call this dot handle unauth. So if that happens, our authenticate method here doesn't even need to call handle auth. Just sign in with pop-up is enough. If we sign in with pop-up, that'll change our auth state, which means on auth state changed, we'll call our function, which will call handle auth for us from the sound of it. Which means I don't even need to call handle auth from the sign-in page. I don't even need to pass this prop in anymore. I'm still calling it from inside handle submit, but this is all fake anyway. That's if we're doing username and password. I don't even know how to do that yet. So you see what's going on? As soon as the component loads, we're going to start waiting for any change to our authentication status. If it finds out we're signed in, this will get called, and we'll call handle auth, which will make sure that state and local storage reflect our status. Otherwise, it means if we call this function, that means our auth status changed, which means we did one or the other. So if we hit the else, that means we signed out, and we should call handle on auth to remove the user from state and from local storage. Let's test it out. We're currently signed out, right? Let's sign in. Change to both places. Sign out. Change to both places. So both windows were listening for any change to our authentication state. That's what on-auth state change means. So both windows were already listening for Firebase, for something to change on the Firebase side. When it does, it automatically calls this function, which will automatically call handle on-auth or handle auth. Right. Yep. So handle authentication state changes properly. So it's actually, our code is simpler in a lot of places. This is getting pretty interesting.